Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Unscripted and Unchained RPG Review. I am DM Bloodworth, and as you can see by the graphics, I'm going to be doing a comparison. I don't know if it's necessarily a versus, but it is a comparison between the TSR's Dungeons and Dragons starter set versus the D&D starter set of 5e. Now, I know this is most likely going to be the most either controversial or video that gets the most commentary and hot takes on this on this topic because although I'm going to try to present this in an unbiased way, I'm not sure I'll be completely completely efficient in doing that or just accurate in doing that. And that's because it's not truly a fair comparison between the two. So I want to look at it as I want to look at the two different versions as a vehicle for introducing new players to the game. And so that's where my argument is going to be focused on is that, and I'll be upfront, right off. I think that the first edition or the expanded first edition of Dungeons and Dragons is probably better suited for introducing players to the game, and that's because the glaring omission of character creation in the D&D starter set of 5e. But let's start taking a look at the books and going through the process of showing where each one's strengths are, and then I'll leave it up to you to continue to discuss, and that includes either that includes in criticizing my take on this or agreeing with it. So but I'd like to see as much discussion as possible here, and then later on I'll do other comparison videos, like I could compare D&D to the starter set of Pathfinder, or vice versa. Just make other comparisons going along and looking at various box sets and how these starter box sets, function as an introduction for new players, either to that particular game system or to role playing in general. So, without further ado, I'm going to switch over to several different views here. And let's see, the first one I'm going to go to is the big screen. So the comparison that I'm making today, as I'm using always mess it up, going to take a look at TSR's Dungeons and Dragons, the basic set. This actual printing is the 1981. So this came in the magenta box set, which I have a full box set of. And this here will take you, and I will switch views here and see if we can do this again. And while I have this screen up here, it's going to be compared to the D&D starter rules set. And then when I go to the next step, I'll show the other books as well that go along with this. So here we go. I might have to orient this. I'm going to have to switch this around from time to time. I'm not quite up to I'm not quite up to 3 cameras yet. I don't know if I ever will. I think that will be a little bit too crazy. So, D&D basic set. And, so you go through the introduction and everything. And here is the key difference. And this is the player character information. And this is the character generation. And what I really like about this is that it's literally 2 pages in, and they jump right into the how to create a character, and they give you a sample character sheet here, and then a summary. So really, all you have to do is focus right here, and you can start to say, all right, so this is how I create a character. It then moves on, and you select. It describes the character abilities. So your basic, your strength, your intelligence, your wisdom, dexterity, constitution, and charisma. It talks about the ability score adjustments. So they use a system where you roll your 3d6 and you place them into the stats as they're listed on the character sheet. So you're going to go strength, intelligence, wisdom, dexterity, constitution, charisma in that order. Now, let's say that you really want to play a thief character, which needs a fairly high dexterity score, but you rolled a 17 for intelligence and a 16 for dexterity. Well, what this rule allows you to do in adjusting is that it is possible to raise one's character score in a prime requisite by lowering the scores of some other abilities. That adjustment shows that the character may practice hard and learn how to fight or reason well, but at the cost of not developing another ability. So this is kind of explained away in your character's development before they've actually reached the point where they begin adventuring. So this is their training earlier on during their lifetime. And it's at a 2-for-1 cost. So if I want to raise that dexterity from a 16 to a 17, I can do that by taking 2 points away from something else. And since I use the example of a 17 intelligence, I would reduce that to a 15, and that would give me a 17 in dexterity and a 15, which is still a very good score in intelligence. And so I can do that just for the prime requisite ability, be raised by 1 point for every 2 that the adjustment is lowered. Now, hit points in first edition is you roll the hit point die for your character. There is no maximum for first level. So you roll what you roll, and then you add your constitution bonus if you have one. And so the characters tend to be, much weaker than in later versions of it. Now they do have a stipulation here, if the DM allows it, that you could re-roll 1s and 2s. So in that case, if you were going to re-roll 1s and 2s, the DM can basically do whatever he or she wants. They can even, under this system, adopt I'm going to give you maximum roll at first level as well. The Dungeon Master in D&D is the final authority on everything. All right? It is, that person's role is basically to determine everything. And so even if there is a rule in the book, the DM has the discretion to say, well, I'm going to modify that or completely eradicate that. And that's the role of a DM. That might also be another controversial debate amongst others, but that's as it was laid out, by Gary Gygax, very early on, that the DM is basically in control, and these are simply guidelines. I could pull that quote from Pirates of the Caribbean, the first movie, where they say, well, the code is basically, simply a guideline. They go on to the character class tables, and your characters can be clerics, dwarves, elves, fighters, halflings, magic users, or thieves. All right, and then they would have the skills. Now, this book here, you can see it brings every character class just up to level 3. So this is the basic system is for levels, 1 through 3. And later on, and I'll show you that version a little bit later on it will advance further than that. But for this here, for this entry level, introduce your players to Dungeons and Dragons, that's what this one does. And it goes through the character classes. Talks about alignment. There's only 3 types of alignment in this version, which is law, chaos, and neutral. And then going on to the basics of, the cost for weapons and equipment. So you start off with some things. I just, for the first time, noticed that some things are checked off in here. I wonder why. I don't know if that's actually written in or that was originally there. Kind of weird. Let's see if a check mark means anything. It's the first time I'm really digging through this. So hopefully that's something that the person did not write in, but it might be. So it might be some minor things. For this box set, I paid about $100 for this box set. So it was really, really nice condition. I was happy with it, very happy with it. But this is my first time tearing through the book itself. So they go through, the various things. So there's a lot in here. So by the time we get to part 5, we're dealing with encounters. They deal with, certain rules in this workbook. In this book, going through more basics about the combat sequence and such. Going to the basics of character attacks, morale, saving throws. Then here we have monsters. So you're going to go into kind of a mini monster manual. So that's also included in this. Now, this particular box set, everything was self-contained into one booklet. So we have, all of your, very iconic, monsters, from kobolds to, Medusa and so on, the rust monster. And flipping through. Then we go to part 7, treasures. And so the dungeon master can look over various treasures and see what he or she wants to include. Then we get to the dungeon master's information section where they will go through. And this helps you kind of create adventures and create, things, deal with wandering monsters for your particular, things. And it sets wandering monsters based on level. So if your party level is basically 1, this is what your, what wandering monsters might exist in the, in the dungeon that you've created. Level 2, level 3, and so far. Then they give you an example scenario of, bringing your characters through this very, very basic, the Haunted Keep here, and a very basic adventure. So, and here's the character sheet. I will turn it this way. So here's the character sheet for it, and it's very basic, right? So just very basic information here as far as your attributes, your attribute modifiers or saving throws, magic items, other, normal items that they're carrying, other, notes for the character's name, armor class, level, a picture if you want to sketch that in that little box there, and then what they need in order to hit the various, what they need to hit the various armor classes is down here. All right, so hit roll needed, and then other items here. So now that we've kind of gone through that, when I switch over to the next book, so now I'm going to take a look and go through very similar, the same thing here, and go through this, the same approach as far as pointing out, what is there, what is not there, and then we'll go from there. So here we have the starter set rules. Now, like I said earlier, the big difference is that the D&D starter set for 5e does not include character creation. And even in the more updated version of it, or just the Stranger Things printing of this, because I just checked, it still does not include that either. Now, I'm told that you can get, when you buy the PDF of this, you do get another additional 100 pages, but it still doesn't include character creation. And I'm going to, a little bit later on, go into where that first comes into play. So here we start off with the basics of, getting started and what the dice mean and, what it is to role play. They give you an example of, or an explanation of the abilities, the character, the 6 abilities and such. They don't. They talk about the dice range of being anywhere from 3 to 18. They talk about, what the modifiers would be. They explain making skill checks. They explain dice rolling for advantage and disadvantage. That's something that was not in the original. So based on your dice rolls, you can, produce an advantage, which might give you an additional attack, or might lead to some other condition created by that, or a disadvantage, which would have obviously negative impact based on your roll. So ability checks, which is something that the original didn't spend too much time on doing, just straight up ability checks. Proficiency bonuses, which the other does not have very much of. Skills and various skills. And this is where 5e kind of expands upon what first edition did not do. So, if I were to say that, this is an advantage to 5e, this is where you're going to start to see those advantages, in that this is a much more complex game system. And I don't mean that in a negative sense. It's a much more complex system in that it gives better explanations of, what you can do. It gives more of a sense that even if you don't have a particular skill, you can still make attempts at doing various things. And that's something that 1E does not really emphasize. Even though you could do it, it's not something that, it's explicit and saying, yes, you can do this. The order of combat is very similar, surprise, initiative, so this hasn't really changed very much. They go through the attack rolls and, what it means for, making those, actually hitting the target that you're swinging at. It does include, like I said, that advantage and disadvantage system. They have various rules. They go into healing and, damage rolls and healing, and still going through this one book volume. Travel, they include travel, as far as, short rests, long rests, rewards, so experience rewards. Then they go into the equipment, and they do have the equipment charts in here, which include cost and, damage and weight and properties that these things have. They go through regular adventure gear here, which both books had in common. They continue on, so spells and the various spells, all the way up to the same level range, pretty much, third level. So this book is, and that's why I compare these two, is because they're both designed to bring your character up to level 3 and not much further on. And then it goes to, the end here. So here's the appendix on conditions. So this is something slightly different than what the earlier version had done, is that it actually creates these various conditions that you might also suffer as part of, conditions alter a creature's capability in a variety of ways. So it was a little bit more nuanced than the other version. Now, the character sheet here, and it is right side up, good. So the character sheet here is the one that I pulled, for encounters, and this is the one that actually comes out of the box set. And so you can see you put your attributes and its modifier here. You can put your saving throws that are based on the attributes. That's something a little different than prior to as well. And then these skills. These skills are something that was not in the first edition either. Then you have personality traits, ideals, bonds, flaws that first edition did not have, but the basic set, this basic box set does not give you any, idea of how to do these, because the box set comes with pre-generated characters. So you're really meant to use pre-generated characters for this box set. There is no monster manual in the starter rule set. There is no even a condensed one. There is a starter adventure, which is actually quite long. You can play that adventure, I would say, for several weeks worth of adventuring, but no real way to expand beyond that. So let me come back over to here. So, that's the two books in their comparison, pretty much straight up. Now, in order to expand upon this version, in 1983, at least I believe that was the first year that what's called the Menser edition. So this was actually, they label it 74. This one was 83. So it has the player manual. Excuse me. It does have the player manual, which is, very, very similar. Just some advanced skills are included here. But it also comes with a second booklet. And the second booklet is the Dungeon Master's Rulebook. And this here, will go through things like changing alignment. It goes to, more monsters included into it. It goes through, special attacks and, more treasure items, an expansion, and then an expanded area of creating dungeons. So it adds some rules. It adds some, level of difficulty. It still keeps it at levels 1 through 3, because this becomes part of the BECMI, which is the basic, the expanded, I always get this acronym wrong, the master, the last one, I'm forgetting one of them. Oh, champion. So basic, expanded, champion, master, and immortals. So this is the first of that particular series of box sets that came out. Now, just in comparison to, actually, I'll get that to last. So expanding upon and adding character creation to the D&D 5e box set, or the starter set, the next thing you need is this. All right, so this is the Dungeons & Dragons Player's Handbook 5e, obviously the hardcover, although you can get this in PDF, and, I haven't seen it in soft cover, so you can certainly get this in PDF as well. And this finally allows you the ability to create a character. And the characters are much more in-depth as far as backgrounds and skills and such than Basic Edition, but it requires this. It also requires one of these, all right, which, so if you're going to be, introducing yourself to Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, and you want to write your own adventures, you are going to have to get the box set or forego the box set completely and just go with these two. Now, you're also going to probably want to get the Dungeon Master's Guide, which is another big volume like this as well. But once again, now you're getting what's called the 3 core books. And once you've gotten those, you don't need the starter set at all. The starter set can only take you in 5e so far. Whereas the starter set here, you can play this with, your group of characters for quite some time, much longer than the starter set of 5e. At least that's my belief that you can, especially if you want to keep on generating, a new set of first level characters. You can do that and really never go beyond that one box. So that does have the potential, whereas the 5e starter set is giving you pre-made characters. And sure, you could change their names and you could do other things, but you're not going to have the information at hand in order to roll completely different characters. So that's the comparison between the two that I see. There's strengths and deficits to both, but I would argue that if you want to start off a new group of players and introduce them to Dungeons and Dragons, and introduce them to something that they can create right from the start, because a lot of the other things that this fleshes out, the 5e fleshes out, you can do that on your own, especially if you're aware that it exists out there. And you can get these in PDF just as easily as you can find the 5e in PDF, and probably for about the same price as well. So, and just, I got the 1983 box set, that wasn't complete, but it had the 2 books, and that I paid like $20 for. So, these books alone are, 30, if you're getting, or 25, 30, if you're getting them on most, general retailers. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you, please feel free to comment on, what I've been talking here. If you have a, if you have a different view, I certainly welcome it. If you have something to add, say, hey, take a look at this or do this comparison between this and another, certainly take suggestions like that. And I look forward to seeing you on the gaming screen sometime very soon. Thanks for joining in. If you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing, and I'm going to tear through, getting ready for a dental appointment, so I'm, home today. That's why I'm videoing at such a weird time. But while I'm waiting, I'm going to continue watching. I just got this as well. I'm going to do a review of the Dungeons & Dragons animated series. I got all 27 episodes. Picked it up on Amazon. So I'll do a separate video of this. I'm kind of in my 1980s nostalgia feeling right now. So I was like, let me, watch. I watched the first 9 episodes, and I remember the ninth episode was the Quest of the Skeleton Warrior. If you remember that one, when I do the video on this, I'm certainly going to try to pop up pieces of the various video stories, and I'll probably get a copyright hit for it, but I don't know any other way to actually, do a review on a video without showing at least little bits and pieces of it. So hopefully I can avoid the hit, but maybe not. So anyhow, thanks for joining in. Leave your comments, leave your suggestions for anything new. I will do a video a little bit later on, a channel update and talk about some of the Kickstarters that I've already seen. I just recently backed a new one, so that'll be following up in a little bit, sometime today as well. So thanks for joining, and have a good remainder of your week.